when it comes to the women defenders around the world. They don't receive enough recognition.
A warm welcome to Young Voices, an intercultural podcast. We are Young at Mission 21, and with this podcast, we want to give young people from all over the world a voice. Thanks to everyone for joining us on this journey to listen, learn, and grow together.
Hello everyone, Lisa and Sarah here. Welcome to this new podcast episode. Today our guests will talk about environmental and social activism, particularly as it is linked to the lives of Indigenous women in Peru. Lisa, what are your thoughts on that subject just now before we start the conversation with our guest?
I don't have many thoughts yet, so I'm really excited to talk to Katy and to get to know more, but I'm really excited to talk and to hear and to listen to what you have to tell us today.
Cool. Well, I'm very excited too to learn more about it, and I am sure our listeners are too. So I'd say without further ado, let's get started. Our guest today is Katy. Katy is in her 20s and lives in Peru. She is a sociologist specialized in questions on gender equality and an active advocate against gender-based violence as well as social discrimination. We have known Katy for a while as she's part of the current Youth Ambassador program, and this summer we could even meet her in person when she visited Switzerland. Now, however, she's back in Peru and we can see her on our screens, unfortunately only. We are all connected by screens right now. And so hello, Katy, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Sarah. Hi, Lisa. I am so happy for this meeting, for this conversation, and especially for seeing you both again. As you said, since last summer, since we were all in Basel, in Switzerland. So hi also to all of your beautiful listeners. As Sarah has told you, I am Katy from Peru. And today I'm going to talk about 11 amazing women from my country, about their struggles, about their fights for their rights, and also for their territories' rights.
Wow, thank you for this introduction. Where are you calling us from? Are you at home?
Yes, I am at home. I am in Cusco. I live in Cusco. I am just really excited for this conversation, and I really want to talk so much about these 11 women. And if you don't mind, maybe I can mention the names of these women. Is it okay?
Yeah, you can mention them. Yes, sure.
So these are Virginia Pinares, Elsa Merma, Leonela Labra, Ingrid Martínez, Marisol Sinanyuca, Milus Quispe Tuiro, Yoconda Vaca, Clara Tinoco, Antonia Tarapaki, Victoria Wilca, and Ines Condori. They are all from Peru, from Apurímac and Cusco, two regions of my country, and they are these amazing indigenous grassroots leaders from the south of Peru.
And you work with them?
Yeah, I know all of them. Some of them are better than others, but I do consider all of them like role models for me because of their fight, because of what they believe in, and because of even how difficult their life has been. They really are. They really believe in what they are fighting for, especially when it comes to women's rights on their territories' rights.
Wow, very impressive. We would like to learn a little bit more about your perspective on Peru, which is where you are currently at. What do you want people to know about it? What do you want people to know about Cusco, or the specific context you're living, the specific part of Cusco that you're living, or Peru in general?
Okay, so thank you, Sarah, for that question. I think it's really important because here in Peru, we are facing like two important contextual situations. On one hand, we have like this authoritarian government that it's just currently like taking off some rights, extinguishing some laws, especially laws that regards like women's rights and gender equalities issues. And for on the other hand, like specifically like the region that I live in, that is Cusco, we have like a long history of living with some mining companies. Some of them are from Europe, for example, like Glencore, and I think it's from Switzerland actually, and other like mining companies now that are from China, for example, and also Canadian mining companies. So here in Cusco, because of the work that I do and everything that you so beautifully have mentioned before, I am very much in touch with women that live really nearby these companies' exploration and extraction activities. For example, here in Cusco, we have two provinces. One is called Chumbivilcas and the other one is called Espinar. These provinces they have a relatively long history in living in with mining extraction and mining companies. And some of the social activists that have been poured into this, like, do you know how to say convivencia in Spanish?
To live together.
Yeah, in this living together with these mining companies, they have like learned a lot, but also they have been suffering a lot of consequences in their everyday life. And when it comes to women, these consequences are differentiated because of their gender. But what I want to talk about in this conversation is how these 11 women that I have mentioned before, how they struggle, but also are in a amazing resistance against for their not against for their rights.
And so, what is your daily work, or what is your project? So, what do I imagine when I hear that?
I think like my work, I handle my work like in two directions: the academic direction, that it's like the boring part, but also the part where you can do these beautiful things that like get to put together a book about 11 women. But the other part I actually like the most, but also is like the most challenging for me, is like doing workshops and working on the capacities, the not only the technical capacities, but also the political capacities for these women to be able for them to be confident enough to engage into negotiation with an authority or a mining representative, also facing gender violence from their community and being like a strategical actor for like giving advice or even giving guidance for how to address gender violence on a more institutional level. With these workshops, courses, we try to give them more tools and more knowledge for them to face these social and environmental impacts on their daily life, on their community life. We do other stuff, like we try to like show what they do on their community, political incidents for some laws, or maybe for some new ways of addressing politics, like for for designing politics for them to be taken into the consideration of the government and the authorities. Um, something like that.
Have you ever been part of the negotiations yourself, for example?
No, not yet. I have I think that those spaces are really closed. you can go if you like represent an organization, a community, or like when you are an authority, social or public authority. For NGOs, it's really difficult to assist to this negotiation because we are seeing like the the bad influence, a bad influence for the community of the organization. So it's really difficult for us to be part of these negotiations. But many of these women, they have been part of the negotiations with the government and the mining companies.
I noticed in our talk that we had before the podcast that you are very, very passionate about your work. When I asked you if you wanted, what topic you wanted to talk about that is important to you, that is dear to your heart, you kept referring to your work. Where does this passion come from? What is it that passionates you about it personally?
Well, I think that I have always been really attracted to the feminist ideas and the feminist fight, the historically feminist fight. But when I got to meet these women, I think my feminism restructure itself because I come from a much more privileged world, even if I have also I had also to struggle with some social structures like racism or something like that. I think that when I met them, they show me how the liberation of women, how it had to include not only the liberation, like the white idea of liberation, but also the autonomy of being able to decide about their territories that are an extension of their own bodies because they cultivated, they practice agriculture, they feed their families themselves, they take care of the water fountains. They do rituals to show how grateful they are to motherland for everything that it gives to us. I think that having the opportunity of meeting these women, it gave my feminist advocacy work or my commitment to the feminism another perspective, a perspective that is more articulated with communitary way of living and a way of being respectful to the motherland, and also a perspective where I can see how colonialism and racism really still are a problem here in the global south of the world.
How did you first meet these women? Did you meet them through work, or did you meet them through something else and then got to work with them?
Well, I have heard about them when I was in college. I read articles or I saw interviews on the national news, but I got to meet them like more closely when I started to work at Centro Bartolomé de las Casas. There is where I think I got to know them better, especially when writing their stories, because they told us, me and Rocío, who is the editor, Rocío Silva Santiesteban, who is the editor of this book, every aspect of their life, like from childhood to the present to the adulthood.
What is the name of the book?
In Spanish, Defensores de la Naturaleza. In English, Environmental Defenders.
Is there an English version?
Not yet.
I'm waiting for it. So I can read it and understand what I'm actually reading.
I'm so sorry, but the comic is like the easy version for the general public.
So you already talked about these women as a group of people who live in Cusco. Would you say that there are different groups, different social groups that you would distinguish?
Well, it's Cusco and also Apurimac, two regions of Peru, both in the south of Peru. These women are from they are from a really young age. They are like in their 20s also, some of them, but also they are a bit older, like 50 to 60 years old. The age gap is really wide in the case of these women. But actually, I think that what unifies them all is that they are indigenous women. Like many of them speak or at least understand Quechua, that is one of our indigenous main indigenous language in Peru. And another thing that I think makes them really similar in their experience of life is how a life of being a social advocate has had some consequences for them. Like something that I think it's really common amongst them is that many of them have been criminalized by the mining companies. Many of them have suffered sexism because of their public activities, because of their leadership, and also many of them have suffered some kind of, I don't know how to, defamation or something related to that, not only from the mining companies, but also from the government. That here in Peru we have this way of diminishing and also like making our right of protest like less valuable by calling the social activist terrorista, or like by labeling terrorist or something very similar to that word. In that by using that word, we we undermine their demands, their life of protest, of resistance, and also we make them much more difficult to stay as a social activist.
Can I ask what actions do they take in order to speak up their demands, or what actions do they take to be heard?
Well, to answer that, I think that it's important that one of the main demands that these women have is how to defend Pachamama. I think I talk a lot about Pachamama when I was in Switzerland, that it's the Quechua word for motherland. In these defending actions, they try to actually gain some kind of due diligence from the mining companies. For example, some of the ecological problems that the mining activities and the mining companies leave behind are like water contamination and land contamination, and also like the poisoning of the land. So agricultural activities become less and less valuable. In this, when they notice that these problems are being more and more problematic for their daily life as a community, as an indigenous community, they try to speak up. They try to reach some of our government institutions that deal with environmental contamination, especially. But most of the time, our institutions do not pay attention or do not pay enough attention to these consequences, to these environmental problems, and they have to get into some more, not radical, but like more visible actions like strikes, like forms of protest. And one of the most important forms of protest that we have here in the South is the closing of this corridor that in Spanish is called Corredor Vial Minero. I think the correct translation in English is mining corridor transportation. Maybe it makes some sense. And when they take and close this corridor, it's like the most radical form of protest, because they stop the transportation of the minerals to the port where they are exported to Europe, Canada, or China, depending on the company nationality. So
how do they close the corridor?
They
block it.
They block it with stones, but mostly they gather a large group of people, and they stay on the corridor. It's interesting. It's something interesting to watch, because you can see the women cooking food for their partners, their male partners, also singing. Sometimes it's not so interesting. Sometimes it's more like you blockaded the corridor with big stones or trees or anything that you can find on the field on this territory. You try to resist, and you're as much as you need, or depending on how long it takes the government to come to the corridor and initiate negotiations with the community or with the organization.
And who is participating in the blockings? Or generally, who is participating in the strikes and the protests and speaking up for the demands?
Generally, the male leaders of the community or the organization, but especially since we have this political crisis in 2022, we've been seeing more female leaderships taking the protagonism of these strikes and speaking up about their demands. And just to come back to these 11 women, these are some of the most important women leaders here in Cusco and Apurímac. They have a lot of experience in engaging into negotiations, not only with the government, but also with the mining company. And that's why they face all of these consequences and the struggles that I just mentioned before.
Wow, what an interesting talk we've had with Katy. So much so that we couldn't fit it into a single episode. Listen to our next episode if you are interested in learning more. In this next episode, Katy will talk about the impact of activism, and especially about the difficulties of being a female activist.
Have a good time, and if you haven't already, follow Young at Mission 21 on Instagram and Facebook, where you can learn more about us and our projects. There you also have the opportunity to ask questions to our podcast guests. And don't forget, always listen to the voices around you.